Well, folks, here we are again. Time for the weekly forecast. Before we get to the main forecast, let's take a brief summary of the past 7 days. Of course, we've seen some precipitation move in last week, and primarily north central and northeast Nebraska were the big winners of the precip. And then we also seen a cold frontal system moving through the state as we got into the midweek time frame that did generate some scatter shower activity across portions of the northern sandhills, a little bit in the far eastern panhandle, and then a main band of precipitation developed primarily along the I-80 corridor southward as we got into the Thursday. And then of course yesterday we did see a scattering of thunderstorms pretty much across eastern Nebraska. Now we are looking at this thunderstorm activity to move out of the region as we move in through this weekend, and once again we have some much cooler conditions, and that seems to be the pattern that we've been established firmly now for the last 2 weeks. Look at the last 2 weeks. We've had some warm days in there, but overall, on an average for the state, 10 of the last 13 days have been below normal. So that might be the trend that we might be faced with as we get farther into the future, but certainly we are going to see a little bit of warmer temperatures move into the region before we get another chance of some precipitation possibly working in toward the end of next week. Let's take a look at the forecast, and as we go to the upper air models, what we will notice is that we do have a little low pressure system once again moving across the southern Canada border that's going to move over to the Great Lakes and start to drive down a troughing pattern in the eastern United States. So this piece of energy that is shown right here in eastern Iowa for this afternoon will be clearing the state as the day progresses, and we'll see an end of the precipitation, and we'll start to see some nicer conditions. We should see highs that'll be primarily in the low to mid 80s across the north. If the clouds hang on a little bit longer, we'll see those temperatures drop maybe 5 degrees to the upper 70s. Across extreme southwestern Nebraska, closer to where the real heat in the desert southwest is, we maybe see temperatures that'll be in the upper 80s to low 90s. Now as we go into tomorrow, we will notice that there is a little dip in the jet, and we're starting to see that trough starting to develop to the east of us, so we are going to still remain cool in the eastern part of the state. We're looking at highs in the mid 80s across the northeast. As we get into southwest Nebraska, we'll definitely be in the low 90s. Now as we go into Monday, we'll start to see that ridge starting to form and starting to bubble up and bring the heat to the western part of the state, so we are looking at mid to upper 90s across the southwest. In the east, especially extreme eastern Nebraska, we may still stay cool, primarily in the mid to upper 80s. As we go into Tuesday, now we start to see that ridge pushing in and much warmer conditions. We'll be looking at highs in the low 90s across the east to the mid to upper 90s across extreme western Nebraska, with an outside chance of some isolated thunderstorms developing in the afternoon. As we get into Wednesday, pretty much the same thing. Hurricane Isaac is expected to make landfall in the Florida Panhandle. If it goes a little farther west, we could see moisture shunting up into the central corn, but overall we're looking at highs in the mid 90s across the east to the upper 90s across the west. Thursday, pretty much the same thing. The high is centered right over top as we're looking at highs in the upper 80s across the northwest, to possibly even seeing the lower to upper 90s across the south. And as we get into Friday, pretty much the same conditions. We're looking at highs in the upper 80s north to around the mid 90s south. 8 to 14 day forecast next Thursday, the following Tuesday, above normal temperatures. And in terms of precipitation, the tri-trend continues, especially for the western half of the United States.